Welcome to the Healthy Compulsive Project podcast, where you can take a deep dive to explore the pitfalls and potential of the obsessive-compulsive personality, offering hope and help for perfectionists, workaholics, micromanagers, type A personality, and control freaks. Hello, everyone. I'm Gary Trosclair, psychotherapist, Jungian analyst, and author of the Healthy Compulsive Project book, blog, and podcast. My experience of most compulsive people is that they insist on being efficient. For myself, I don't mind spending time or money on anything that has meaning for me, but I hate wasting time, money, or energy. Problem is, haste does make waste, and that applies to therapy as well. So, I've outlined some of the most important tools in therapy to make sure that you don't waste your time there, or that you feel like you're wasting time when you're actually doing good work. This is episode 50 of the Healthy Compulsive Project podcast, How to Not Waste Your Time in Therapy. Sometimes you can tell that therapy is going well, and you have a satisfying sense that something is shifting inside of you. But at other times, it's not so satisfying, and you may wonder if you're wasting your time in therapy. If that's the case, tell your therapist what you're feeling. But there are also checkpoints you can ask yourself about to see if there's more you can do to make it effective. We'll explore 5 of those today. This post is for people who are concerned about wasting their time in therapy. If this isn't you, please don't take it as a lecture on how to do therapy. But for many people who read this blog, urgency and efficiency are an issue. And if you've been reluctant to start therapy for these reasons, this blog's for you. I want to reassure both groups of people that you can make it efficient and effective. Some habits that you bring into therapy could slow your progress down, but some of your personality traits, used consciously, could speed you up. This is the nature of therapy, and working these through is what makes it brighter on the other side. Any effort you put into making therapy work will also make your life work. Think of it this way. You're going on a trip in a car. How fast that car goes depends somewhat on what habits you fill the car with, and also which personality traits you use to fuel the car. Some things will weigh you down, and others will speed you up. Sorting out bad habits from potentially good traits helps not just therapy, but life as well. There's plenty of research demonstrating that therapy is effective in promoting change. But we also know that it helps some people more than others, and that some people get better faster than others. Just why that's so is a complex question that I can't explore thoroughly here. But I can say that a lot of research indicates that one of the most significant factors in whether therapy is effective is your own contribution to the work. Well, okay, but what does that mean? What am I supposed to be doing? You don't need any more shoulds in your life, so we're not going to get heavy with this stuff. But because what you can do to make therapy effective isn't so clear, I think it's worth discussing a few things you can do to improve the outcome. Therapists can try to explain what it means to work in therapy, but it's difficult to briefly describe how the process works, and delivering even a short discourse in session about that can disrupt the natural flow of the work. The content of therapy, the specifics of what clients talk about in sessions, differs widely from person to person and can't be prescribed. But the process of therapy, the how, includes essential practices that are helpful to be aware of, whether it's depression, work addiction, anxiety, general well-being, or other issues that bring you into therapy. These tools constitute the heart and soul of working on it in therapy. Using compulsive traits in therapy to not waste time. In this post, I'll focus on 5 tools to help you use your time and your personality traits in therapy efficiently. While anyone can use these tools in therapy, I'll describe how these tools specifically apply to people who are perfectionistic, obsessive-compulsive, workaholic, and type A. I describe these tools and others in more depth and for a more general audience in my first book, I'm Working on It in Therapy: How to Get the Most Out of Psychotherapy. Learning to use these tools consciously and intentionally, both in and out of session, helps clients who go to therapy continue to benefit from the process long after they've stopped seeing their therapist. These tools are no secret, yet they are not well known. The process of therapy may seem counterintuitive for those of you who are compulsive. Where you usually tighten up, you may need to loosen up. Where you tend to use control, planning, and willpower, you may need to use the natural diligence that fuels those habits instead to let go, be spontaneous, and focus on feeling rather than productivity. You can use your healthy compulsive tendencies to integrate new ways of seeing and being. It's the same energy and meticulousness that you use to clean a closet, plan a trip, or immediately catch every single formatting error your colleague made in the slide presentation the two of you need to give your manager tomorrow. But now, use this energy lightly, without the do or die intensity that fueled the bad habits before. And remember, while we don't want you to waste time in therapy, we also don't want you to rush through it like you're racing in the Daytona 500. Your standards for how efficient the process should be may be on the high side. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good by insisting on immediate progress. Rather, use your determination to stick with it for the long haul. Faster isn't always better. 5 tools. So, here are 5 tools to help you make progress in therapy. The point is not to execute them perfectly. Rather, to notice when they're difficult and use that as an opening to work on your issues in your sessions. Number 1, focus on what's within your control and mourn the rest. If you focus too much on what's wrong with your partner, kids, boss, colleagues, or universe, you will be weighing down the car and slowing progress down. Instead, focus on whether part of that situation could be your responsibility. Here's where compulsive conscientiousness comes in handy. What gets triggered in you? How could you respond differently? It's very tempting to spend your time in therapy explaining and venting about how unconscientious, stupid, and lazy other people are. Don't. A small amount of that feels good and is helpful at first, but the returns diminish quickly. Use anger for change and grieve what you can't control. Randall came to therapy at the suggestion of his son's therapist. He took his role as a father very seriously and was determined to give his son, Mason, a leg up in this competitive world. But Mason was far more interested in playing video games and reading fantasy fiction than searching the Fisk Guide to Colleges for his academic Shangri-La. This was not what Randall had in mind for his son, and he felt compelled to spend his time in session explaining every week how frustrating it was to watch Mason wander without a career direction, and why it was a bad idea to let him wander like that. Eventually, he did have to accept that Mason was largely beyond his control at this point, and offering support for what Mason did like was far more effective than trying to steer him into more, quote, reliable interests. Unconditional love is more effective than achievement-based love. Randall used his capacity to target problems to make that his new focus. This meant that rather than spend time in session talking about Mason's inevitable downfall, he spoke more about his own reactions, his fears, and his background, so that he could let go of the overly specific dreams he had for him, which was the most helpful thing he could do for his son. Number 2. Focus on recurring themes and patterns, not just the crisis of the week. Identifying the recurring challenges of your life can help you to name your goals, which serve as good fuel for your trip. If you aren't focused on them, you may be wasting your time. Seek out the recurring themes and patterns. One-offs are not worth digging into. Monitor your obsessive tendencies to make sure you don't get bogged down in extraneous, singular detail rather than seeing the common denominators that shape your ongoing experience. Explore whether you reacted to challenges this week as you did in previous weeks and years, or with more mindfulness. The more you can track these during the week and bring them back to the session as raw material, the better. Naomi settled quickly into therapy and had no difficulty finding things to talk about. The problem was that there were so many incidents in her week that she mainly just reported what happened each week, with little progress being made on her perfectionistic tendencies and rigid reactions. Eventually, her therapist asked her what all these incidents had in common. Naomi was stumped at first, but then realized that each of the incidents pushed her buttons because the people involved were violating what she saw as fundamental morals, and she felt it was her responsibility to set them straight. Having been a parentified child that had to manage her family from a young age, she needed to sort out where her responsibilities ended and to let others go their own way. Number 3, allow yourself to feel and express emotions. It helps to balance your focus on goals, the future, with feeling and spontaneity, that is, the present. Don't try to be productive or reasonable all the time. Speak in first person, that is, I, about your personal experience rather than make generalized statements about what most people are like. Expressing feeling is a powerful tool in rewiring old memories and overcoming old ways of coping with whatever you had to face. Emotions are like a lubricant for the brain to run smoothly and change. Sure, you could wait and force your therapist to ask the inevitable question, "And how do you feel about that?" But wouldn't that take longer? Bruce didn't know what his therapist meant when he asked about feelings. He did know that he felt best when he was working, but he had no words for the discomfort he felt when he wasn't working. As a professor, he was apt at expounding on his thoughts at great length, and as a researcher, he could easily lose himself in numbers and writing. He genuinely loved thinking. Feeling was a void, one he avoided without knowing the costs. His tendency in session was to make generalized statements and to try to home in meticulously on why he was the way he was. Insight is valuable, but real understanding and change comes more from exposing ourselves to deeper levels of feeling, not just from intellectual analysis. But his dreams of being chased and running frantically into the library were not lost on him. It took persistence from both him and his therapist to hold up a stop sign every time he left first person for third person in his mad dash for the security of the intellectualized library. But eventually he was able to identify the fears that led him to run away from feelings he didn't want and begin to move toward what he did want. Even a happy place becomes a prison when it becomes a habit of escape. 4. Let your therapist know if you have concerns about your work in therapy. Don't like what your therapist is doing? Tell her, not the hundreds of thousands of people on Quora, the social media platform where people ask questions, who have no idea what's going on in your sessions. This is partly so that she can better help you, but it's also a matter of learning about yourself. You might be tempted to hide any critical, perfectionistic thoughts you have about them, or you might want to inform them of every mistake they've ever made. Either way, you can use the therapeutic relationship to see how you manage your perfectionism. Your reaction to whatever's happening in the therapy office may tell you a lot about yourself and serve as fuel for your trip. To use your time effectively, mind the setting for all you can. Sigourney couldn't stop noticing that her therapist, Theodora, always took her side when she spoke about what had happened with her wife Allison each week. In a way, she couldn't blame the therapist because she did report adamantly how difficult Allison was and how difficult it was to get along with her. She feared pointing out Theodora's over-reliance on supportive techniques. After all, she was being very nice to her, and besides, she was the professional and she knew what she was doing. But Sigourney also knew that she could only get limited help if she just had her feelings validated week after week. So, after much hand-wringing and apologies, she told Theodora she needed to be challenged more. Her therapist was then able to acknowledge that she was being too careful, to explore what had led her to do that, and to give Sigourney more feedback on what she could do differently to improve the marriage. At least as important, speaking directly to her therapist and not being so, quote, nice, was an experience that helped her to be more confident in speaking her mind. 5. Bring an open mind. Compulsives have difficulty delegating because no one else will do anything as well as they themselves will, and therapy does require some delegation to arrive at new perspectives. This doesn't mean believing everything your therapist suggests, but just giving their ideas a chance and observing how your critical tendencies might show up in your sessions. The ideas that seem the most foreign may provide the most valuable fuel. Max was very self-observant and questioned whether any therapist could ever really understand him better than he did himself. He acknowledged that he relied on extremely meticulous lists to organize his life. He believed that lists were simply the most reasonable and effective way to organize one's life. But his list became dictatorial, overshadowed his relationships, and sapped his happiness. When his therapist suggested that he go listless on occasion, it didn't go over very well. Going into the world blind and unprepared was not on Max's list. But his therapist felt that not making so many preparatory lists might help him to experience directly the fear that he was trying to avoid. This seemed like malarkey to Max, but he agreed to try it just for the sake of trying something new on principle, even though he knew it wouldn't make a bit of difference. His determination to do the right thing served him well here. When he did take a small trip and managed to restrain himself from making a list, he became aware of his fear that if he did forget something, he would get in trouble. A visceral, indescribable, and irrational core fear. He did forget something on that trip, yet nothing terrible happened. He was gradually able to see his use of planning as a defense, stare down his fear of getting in trouble, and allow his life to evolve more naturally. These are all suggestions for an optimal approach, not rules or rigid imperatives. You and your therapist may have your own way of approaching therapy. My intention is not to challenge that, but rather to deepen and complement the work you are doing. If there appear to be discrepancies between what I suggest and what's happening in your work with your therapist, speak with him or her about it. Discussing what's happening in your sessions can be some of the most valuable work you do there. I also want to be clear that I'm not recommending that anyone dash through therapy. It's understandable that you want to get better sooner and save time and money, but some things you can't rush. You are adding new neural pathways to override the old ones, and that can take time. Besides, you probably live with too much urgency, unnecessary urgency already. You may recognize that you're already using the tools I have suggested here. Hopefully, that reassures you that you're already making progress. You can find transcripts of this podcast with links to research sources and lots more at the Healthy Compulsive blog, www.thehealthycompulsive.com. If you'd like to subscribe to the Healthy Compulsive podcast, hit that subscribe button. And for a thorough guide to cultivating the positive potential of the compulsive personality, find my book on Amazon, The Healthy Compulsive, Healing Obsessive-Compulsive Personality Disorder and Taking the Wheel of the Driven Personality. And if you find any of these helpful, let others know by leaving a review. Till next time, enjoy the drive.